Hello, my name is Jonah Primo, and welcome to the Overexamined Life. So the companion piece to this interview is the previous episode of this podcast, my complete chronic pain recovery. If you missed that, consider checking it out. It will contextualize today's interview. My guest today is the wonderful Nicole Sachs. She's a writer, psychotherapist, and retreat leader, and has helped free hundreds of thousands of people from chronic pain, anxiety, and many other mental and physical conditions. She's done this through her books, her retreats, and her podcast, The Cure for Chronic Pain. She's worked and lectured extensively with Dr. John Sarno to unpack ideas about the mind-body connection for pain sufferers all over the world. And at a personal level, I found Nicole's work towards the end of my own chronic pain journey, but I truly wish I had found it sooner, because Nicole is so fantastic at not only breaking down the science of chronic pain, but also at really tapping into the emotional suffering that people with debilitating conditions experience. There's something about her ability to tie together theory with a deep, undeniable empathy that makes the theory far easier to digest. There's no distance, the way it sometimes can feel like there's a barrier between patient and doctor. And I think that might be partly because of Nicole's own remarkable story of recovery, which we touch on briefly in the interview. We also talk about the science of chronic pain and the nervous system, the role of identity in pain, insomnia, perfectionism, how to meditate in pain, how to meditate for pain, and much more. I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. I learned a lot, and I hope you do too. So, Nicole, I thought maybe we could start with your story, perhaps where your chronic pain started, what you were told, and then after that, we'll talk a little bit about how you've made your recovery and some of the lessons you're now passing on to your students.
Wonderful. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Jonah, for having me. I'm so thrilled to be here. It's so great to be able to share work about chronic pain recovery because honestly, it's astonishing to me how little is out there about the connection between mindfulness and meditation and the cessation of chronic pain. And so I'm thrilled to have the opportunity. So thank you for having me.
Oh, you're absolutely welcome. Very excited to hear what you have to say.
So I'll tell you a little bit about my story. It really begins in earnest when I was 19 years old. I was a freshman in college, and the best way to describe it is my back went out. And anyone who has had back problems know what it's like, totally laid up, unable to function, barely able to get off the floor. And so it necessitated my parents coming to college and literally physically carrying me home.
Wow.
And of course, that was terrifying. But what kind of became more terrifying is when I underwent all the proper tests, x-rays and MRIs and orthopedic surgery consults.
Yep.
And what was discovered is I actually have an abnormality to the lower spine. It's called degenerative spondylolisthesis. And the easiest way to explain that is that in where my spine is supposed to have a disc, I have one that is missing, and both of the vertebrae kind of look as if they're sitting atop one another and one is shifted to the right. It's pretty gnarly.
And this is the first you'd heard of any sort of back pain or chronic pain? Like you weren't part of this world already at 19?
At the time, no. I had no idea. And so once I underwent all these tests and they told me the diagnosis, the Western medical model had certain information that they could share with me about how to live in order to avoid what they said was the only treatment at the time, spinal fusion surgery.
That sounds scary as a 19-year-old to sort of have to take all of this in at once.
Certainly. I mean, not only the surgery, but the prognosis, even having the surgery, was there was no guarantee of pain cessation. And when you fuse your spine, you have decreased mobility for life. And at least in 1990, this was the common conversation. And so I was told I had to immediately cease all exercise, travel.
Wow.
I was not supposed to ride in a car for more than an hour.
Wow.
Because of the bouncing motion and how it could set off my back.
Yeah.
And the likelihood at the time they told me that I would have biological children was slim to none, because the number of months I would have to be on bed rest would be, just not feasible. And so that was sort of a crazy thing to hear.
I mean, you're 19, right? And you have these big plans and ambitions, and you're looking forward to the richness life has to offer, and then all of a sudden it's been completely contracted.
Absolutely. Yes. And I would say part of that I was actually able to take in, and part of it,
Wow.
especially the part about not having children and stuff like that, I just kind of pushed aside, and I was getting on with my life. And through the use of steroids and muscle relaxers and pain medication and, all sorts of physical therapy, I was able to move from acute to chronic pain, meaning I was able to walk.
Yep.
I was able to function. Generally, I was able to return to college, but it was really, really different. I had a handicap sticker on my car.
Wow.
There were a lot of things I was not able to do. I lived in constant fear, and my back hurt all the time. I mean, it was very difficult to sleep. It was very difficult to do anything in terms of physicality. And so it was a long road for me in the space of having chronic pain.
Yeah.
There still was a notion, though, that there had to be more to it, because sometimes my back didn't hurt. And it was so odd. Like I would be at a concert, or I'd be doing something that I really enjoyed, or I'd be in a space where I felt really regulated and at peace. And I would kind of notice, wow, my back isn't hurting. So there was always a little curiosity, a little spark that was there. And so as I moved through my early 20s, I came across the work of Dr. John Sarno. Yeah. So at the time, he was an attending at the Rusk Center for Rehabilitation at NYU Medical Center, and he had put out several best-selling books. They certainly had a cult following, in that if people believed in him, they were all for it.
Yes.
Where he explained that there was a mind-body connection. His most popular book that I love and recommend is The Mind-Body Prescription. And so that was something that I heard about, and it became like, okay, well, maybe there's an answer for me that isn't absolutely what this Western medical model had shown me, were the limits of my experience. So
yes,
I began to look into his work. And what I understood it to be at the time is that we have a reservoir of repressed emotion that exists within us, every one of us.
Okay.
And that reservoir contains rage and shame and grief and terror and all of these big feelings that every human being has that we are not safe to feel. It is not societally appropriate to grieve for too long. People want you to turn the page. It is certainly not societally appropriate to be angry.
Yeah.
Certainly not enraged.
Okay, so this is part of his thesis, is that there's these things that we should be feeling naturally, but we're repressing them to fit into the construct of a civilization.
Exactly. And that's where the brain science comes in, because Dr. Sarno explained, and I have taken what I've learned from him after which I lectured alongside him at NYU. I worked with him as colleagues, and now I've evolved all these practices. So this is the world in which I work, is in the brain science between this emotional repressed world and chronic pain conditions, symptoms, syndromes. So it's not just back pain, neck pain, shoulder pain. It's migraines and irritable bowel and long COVID and chronic fatigue and many of the flares of autoimmune disease. So I work with a lot of different conditions with people around the world.
Yes.
And essentially, the brain science behind it is this. The brain and the nervous system perceive our stored trauma and repressed emotional world as a greater predator to our lives than the physical pain that we experience. So physical pain, and any pain, is actually experienced in the human body as a protective posture. Because when you are in pain, it is required that you slow down, that you take care of yourself, that you ask for help.
Yes.
And in the world of the mind-body connection, you're also safer because when you do slow down and draw boundaries and take care of yourself, you are not in the big bad world that triggers you and upsets you and hurts you, like interactions with other people, like time spent at the workplace, which can trigger you in many ways. It brings up financial stress. It brings up self-worth and purpose. There's so many things that go on that can potentially trigger this emotional reservoir to overflow.
If I understand it correctly, the pain signal is essentially asking us to retreat, where in this world, it's a very primitive mechanism that's saying, go into your cave where it's safe, where you can't get hit by a car, where your boss can't tell you you're not good enough. This is how we get you to retreat into a safe, lined with pillows kind of room.
A padded room, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. So if you think about the fact that the primary purpose of the nervous system and the brain, the reptilian brain, is to keep us alive.
Yes.
Obviously, if we're not alive, we can't feel hurt by somebody and we can't feel a lack of self-worth, right? Being alive is essential. And so because that is the primary purpose, when we go into long-term fight or flight, and when all of these emotions are rising, and when all of our little trauma spots are being touched into, the pain that people experience is the brain and the nervous system sending these pain signals to different muscle groups and systems in order to allow us an option. The pain gives us something. It gives us something that we can at least figuratively control. It gives us something to focus on that feels like we have any sort of agency. And that is what the brain and the nervous system feel is a safer space. And it is what I like to call in my practice safe in the unsafest way.
Yes.
Because although that is perceived as a safer space, the people I work with, the communities that I have been involved with over all these years of teaching and living this, are people who are suffering. They are on disability. They are missing their children's, milestones. They are oftentimes unable to have relationships and have full, rich lives. And so although that there's a confusion in the mind-body system that this is safe, it certainly isn't.
So Nicole, how do we know when the pain is safe and when the pain is representing something that's actually wrong? Which is certainly how, I guess, that's our default assumption. That's what we're taught. Pain represents you have a muscle tear. It represents you have tissue damage. It's our body's way of saying we have something in trouble. And it also reminds us to, hold knives by the handle and not the pointy end. So it does seem, at least on face value, to be doing a good job. How do we know when to be skeptical of pain and when we should start thinking about whether or not it's actually helping us?
What I tell people first and foremost is get checked out. I am a believer in Western medicine. I utilize it. I am not against medication. I'm not against surgery. I would never want somebody to use mind-body techniques when they indeed had a tumor. So the first line of defense is you get checked out by traditional doctors to the extent that you feel you have taken the right steps. Now, there are two things that most people in my communities are told that this is where I start to get skeptical. The first is, this is something you're just going to have to live with forever.
Yes.
Which is a really tough one to hear. And the second is, we have treatments, but no cure.
Yeah.
So we can try this elimination diet, and we can try this supplement, and we can try this medication, and we can try this exercise, but there's nothing that really makes this go away. It can only be managed. Once you arrive at that place, you really do have the freedom and the space to pause and to open yourself to other modalities. And that's when I like to come in, because the truth is mind-body medicine is not looking to replace Western medicine. It's looking to make space for real solutions that exist adjacent to Western medicine.
Maybe we can use your recovery journey as a canvas for how these techniques started to help you and how they can start to help others.
Yes. Okay. So the best way for me to begin to describe this is there are three facets of my work, and all three work together to help people eliminate chronic pain. It truly leads to a life free of chronic pain. The first is belief or mindset. It is so essential to understand the brain science and to marinate in the stories of people recovered, of the essential truths of mind-body medicine, because when you are there, you are able to bring your nervous system, even if it's only in moments, from fight or flight to rest and repair.
Okay.
It's essential, because the mindset of this is okay. I am in a space where I'm having this pain, but there's nothing wrong with me. I'm not broken. I understand what's going on. That is essential to put you in the place to, quote, do the work. So the second facet of the work that I teach is do the work. And essentially what doing the work is it's understanding that if indeed we each have an emotional reservoir that is bubbling over and mistakenly allowing our brain and our nervous system to think that we're in danger and hence send the pain signals, the way to do the work and get out of it is to put a ladle in that reservoir and start dumping it out. We have to bring ourselves to a place where we feel safe, where we feel at equilibrium. And in my own recovery, after finding Dr. Sarno and after beginning to understand the brain science and put myself in a space of belief, I said to myself, how can I heal? I need to do a science experiment on myself. I need to figure out how to release these repressed emotions. And one of the techniques that was recommended at the time was journaling.
Okay.
And although journaling is fantastic, and all my life, even since a teenager, I used to journal, this repression I found in my recovery journey required a different kind of journaling. And it is a tool that I have coined, and it's called Journal Speak. And when I talk about journal speak, it's not just about journaling. It's literally about learning another language. It's about becoming bilingual. And the language of journal speak is, and this is the best way I can explain it, it's the language of the inner child, the 5-year-old tantruming, expressed child that does not care if you disagree, that does not care if they make a scene, that does not care if they are societally appropriate or polite or however they're making other people feel. Because in each of us is this child. In each of us are these feelings that are desperate to come out. But over the years, we're socialized and we are told that we are not to express those kind of feelings. And we know why, because they really, they set us apart from the group.
Yep.
And that's another thing that's really important. We as a human race seek connection. It is a biological and evolutionary impulse to seek connection, because if we are part of the group, then we are going to be taken care of. We're going to be fed and clothed and sheltered and held. But we also naturally seek authenticity. We want to feel like we are who we are. We are self-expressed. We are in our own skin. We are able to express how we feel. Those two actually conflict with one another. Because sometimes expressing your authenticity, certainly in family systems, will leave you isolated and ostracized from the group. So essentially what Journal Speak is, it's a very private practice. I teach a 30-minute a day practice, which involves, and we can move into the mindfulness because it's a perfect bridge, which involves 20 minutes of Journal Speak, followed by 10 minutes of a meditation practice. Now, I'm a meditator, and I certainly believe that more meditation is better, and I enjoy a longer practice. But for the purposes of chronic pain recovery, I found that there is a sweet spot that people are willing to do.
Yeah, that's key, right? Like you have to be able to fit it into your life. The requirement is not always to be on a year-long silent retreat.
Exactly. And it's a process that builds on itself, but it's consistency that is key. And so as you said, I tried to create something where people would be able to get their mind around it and actually fit it into their daily lives.
So is the idea, this is an inner child that's simply deemed inappropriate to be around others, but this is your time to let that inner child out where it can't hurt anybody, where the tantrum won't make a scene.
Exactly. And, all of us have these feelings and these stories. This is not unique to people in chronic pain. In fact, I think if most people take a look at their lives, there are certain things that get in their way. Whether it might be back pain, it might be migraines, it might be fibromyalgia or IBS. But if you don't identify as having a symptom, the truth is there is always something. It might be a lack of joy for life. It might be a lack of energy. It might be a lack of ability to tap into the moment and be present. But whatever is getting in your way, I can guarantee that this process will begin to set you free, because there is an excavation that comes from doing this work that allows the nervous system to settle many more moments of the day into rest and repair.
Okay, so to connect it with the science, this inner child is essentially what's keeping us in fight or flight. This is the thing that's living in our amygdala, that's sending us into this crazy high stress state. And by freeing it, so to speak, you're allowing yourself to go back into that equilibrium where your nervous system is just on normal playing field. Is that kind of how it connects?
It's close. There's a slight little tweak. So it is not the inner child that is causing the problem. It's the repression of the feelings that are innate to the experience of our society not allowing people to be self-expressed, which is a good thing. We cannot all walk around screaming what we think. We cannot take our clothes off in the grocery store. We cannot, cry all day and night. We have to raise kids and go to work. So repression as a defense mechanism is defending us. It's good. It's working when it's working. But because there is this energy that we have been oftentimes repressing for a lifetime, the buildup of the energy starts to inform the brain and the nervous system that something is wrong. We're in a sympathetic state.
I see.
So it's sort of the danger alarm starts rolling, right? And so when the danger alarm is rolling, we are now looking for a place to find safety, right? You fight, you flee.
And the danger alarm is pain, right? For a lot of people.
Exactly. So the result of the alarm is, okay, we have to figure out how we're going to get safe. Well, how do we get safe? You send a pain signal, and all of a sudden you're free of the relationships that are scaring you, of the obligation. So that's really what it is. So when we do journal speak, we are giving that energy a voice. And the best way to get into journal speak is you take some inventory of your life. You make, a bulleted list of stuff from childhood that you might still be holding on to, a bulleted list of daily life and the things that are constantly triggering you into those more tender spaces. And a bulleted list of your personality, because we tend to be perfectionistic and our own worst critics and hold ourselves to impossible standards. So you just kind of get a bird's eye view of your life. And then what I recommend is take 20 minutes a day and do the journal speak, which is just an unbridled rant. Where you are letting these feelings have a voice. You can use all your language. I'll just say it like that, and you can infer what I mean.
Yeah.
But more than anything, it is honestly, it is a honoring of oneself. It is allowing yourself to be authentic and self-expressed, and then it is destroyed. So after this 20 minutes, I have a client who used to say it's like blowing your nose in a tissue, flush it away, burn it, rip it into a public garbage can. Journal speak is a second language, not other people may not understand it, and you would not want people to see it. You need to be totally free to express yourself.
Okay, that's making sense. Okay, so you let it all out, and no one will ever see it. It'll never see light of day.
And the beauty of it is, as the emotional reservoir is reduced, this is really, really intense, because I hear from people all over the world on a regular basis that are incredulous. As this emotional reservoir is reduced, the pain signals stop firing. And it's almost insane how amazing it is, because it happens sometimes it happens in the moment, and sometimes it happens a few days later, and sometimes it's a process that takes, a little bit of time. But
wow,
the nervous system is not against you. A lot of people in chronic pain feel that their bodies are against them.
Yes.
And I know you understand that. And the thing is, it's really actually your body is really for you and trying to protect you. But as soon as the reservoir isn't bubbling over, the protection isn't necessary and the pain signals stop firing. And one of the things that is the most exciting to do on my podcast, is I for years have interviewed people from all over the world who have these incredible recovery stories. And even though these people are all very different, in many essential ways, they're all the same.
Yeah.
because they're all experiencing this shift and this freedom. So what I do like to say is that the pain is not in your head. It is real. It is experienced. There is nothing about this that you are making up. You're not hysterical. You're not overly sensitive. But the solution is not in your body. It's not in the next supplement or the next exercise or the next procedure. It just oftentimes, in the case of chronic pain, is not. And when people understand the mind-body connection, they're really able to do the work to free themselves.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I want to go to one more thing before we talk about meditation, just because you mentioned perfectionism. And this is almost anecdotal, but I feel like the friends of mine who I would describe as really type A have huge ambitions, who have huge ideas of what they're supposed to get out of life. I feel like sometimes they're the ones who end up having these huge physical implosions. So is there any correlation between perfectionism and chronic pain, or people who are prone to perfectionism and end up with some kind of chronic pain?
The simple answer is yes. So if you think about it this way, it all comes down to this emotional reservoir. And is it overflowing or is it manageable? When you are a perfectionist, when you hold yourself to impossible standards, when you are your own worst critic, when you are what Dr. Sarno coined a goodist, meaning it is so important for you that other people perceive you as a good person. When you have this kind of personality type, every day you experience hundreds of failures. And why is this? Because there's no such thing as being perfect.
Yes.
And so anyone who is perfectionistic, it's funny, I teach retreats on perfectionism and boundaries and codependency. And one of the things I tell people is you can delude yourself into thinking that perfectionism means you're just aiming for the tops of the trees and, you hold yourself to a high standard. But actually, perfectionism is the constant scanning of the landscape for where you're screwing it up. Perfectionists are only looking for where they're not meeting the mark. And that requires a tremendous amount of emotional repression because it is constant that you are being reminded that you should be ashamed or you should be disappointed or you should be resentful because somebody else didn't do what you needed them to do and now the thing isn't perfect. And so yes, indeed, people with more perfectionistic tendencies tend to fall into these chronic pain spirals because the chronic pain protects them from themselves.
That makes sense.
When you can no longer constantly show up for life, you're not constantly failing.
Wow.
And so it does tend to line up.
So let's talk about meditation for a second. What does one meditate for? What sort of thoughts are you looking at when you're meditating? How can one meditate for chronic pain? And secondly, how can you meditate when you're in pain?
Those are great questions. So I'll answer the first one, which is the key, in my opinion, to meditation in chronic pain recovery is to quiet yourself enough so you are not over-identifying with your pain.
Okay.
It's about creating this witness consciousness, this observer, so you're able to pause long enough that you are not completely consumed by your thoughts and feelings and decide that you are your thoughts and feelings.
You don't want to identify with everything that's going through your mind. It doesn't have to be representative of what your life is. You can just watch it. You can observe it as a third party.
And so in this chronic pain paradigm, when you can practice meditation and when you can create that pause for yourself, it is phenomenal the way things can change. Like for example, I've explained that I used to suffer from insomnia. And when I would lay in bed at night and I would perseverate and ruminate and I would have all these fears come up, and it's so easy to unconsciously just identify as you are. You are those fears. You are anxiety. You are anxious.
Yes.
And so what I started to understand through my meditation practice is I can pause and I can say, I see. I'm having an experience of human anxiety. Wow, wild. Okay, so my heart is really thumping and I can put my hand on my chest and say, wow, I can feel it. That's what happens to the human body when we're really anxious. I'm having an experience of fear that this certain thing is going to happen or not going to happen. I can observe myself and then I can meditate and quiet my mind, and I started to be able to fall asleep. And
Amazing.
so that was one of the factors that I used to bring into my practice, is just understanding that when you pair the mindset, which is the understanding of the brain science, the journal speak, which is doing the work and having a practice to get that energy up and out and reduce the reservoir. And then you round it out with mindfulness meditation, establishing that witness consciousness, cultivating that ability to observe rather than to say, I have migraines. You can say, I once in a while experience, headache pain, and some doctors call it migraines, and, okay, that makes sense. I'm going to work toward, just experiencing them. They can sit beside me. I can be with them without being them. And that is a huge transformation for people in terms of furthering their recovery.
Well, it's completely different to identifying as a migraine sufferer, as someone who is a migraine person, who can't go outdoors when the sun's too bright, who can't drink or whatever it might be. Those are all things that come with the package of being a migraine sufferer. But if you maybe don't use that label, the sort of concept of I and migraine, and you just take in these experiences as they come, you might have a different experience, and you might start to break down some of these identities.
Absolutely. And another reason why that's so powerful is when you start doing the work and you start systematically reducing the reservoir, what happens is you are going to get moments where you maybe would have gotten your symptom, and for some reason it doesn't come. Yeah. And so then your responsibility is to believe it, because the most powerful healing comes when your body is your proof. So if you're also practicing mindfulness and creating this witness consciousness and this observer, you are more able to embrace those moments and say, I see. I didn't just get, the neck pain I usually get, or the flare I usually get. And that's when you really start to make leaps and bounds, because the nervous system starts to hear, we are safer than we think. It isn't so necessary to send these pain signals in order to distract us and protect us from this emotional trigger. And it's really astonishing to watch people heal and transform.
That's beautiful, Nicole. Thank you so much. And I really hope that this might be the start of perhaps at least people thinking a little bit differently about their pain and their story of pain.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. And I hope that each person gives themselves the gift of being curious, because if you can replace your fear with curiosity and just try to embrace mind-body medicine, it's amazing what you can do.
Nicole's new book, Mind Your Body, is available for pre-order at nicolesachs.com, and pre-ordering will give you exclusive access to her Mind Your Body conference in late February following the book release. And if you found today's episode to be of some value, please consider leaving a rating or a review, or sharing it with anyone who you think might find the content helpful. My name is Jonah Primo, this is the Overexamined Life, and we'll be back on Monday to explore some more big life-changing ideas. See you next time.